You do have access to microphones and cameras, and so please engage. We always like a engaging webinar. Uh, just some quick announcements before I hand it over to Mike. Real quick, just a reminder, next Friday is our next community exchange in Frankfurt. If you haven't registered yet and you're planning on attending, please get registered. June 19th is the CDBG 101. So if you are looking to learn more about the CDBG process, feel free to attend that. Registration is required. But those are the only announcements I have. Again, thank you, Mike, for joining us, and I will turn it over to him.
Thank you, Abby. And yeah, hello, everybody. It's morning in Seattle. I think it's maybe afternoon or coming up on noon where you all are, depending where you are in the state, I guess. But so nice to see you. And I do hope this will be dynamic. I thought about having a clever title, but today just decided to just say this is just housing. So we're talk all things housing. And to start off, I thought to kind of get to know y'all and get to know your situations. I wondered if a few of you might share some of the answers to the questions here. So what are you seeing as far as housing in your Main Street districts? Is there a lot of demand? Do more people want to live downtown than you have space? How much supply is there? How expensive is it? Kinds of housing? And is there space to grow? I think I'm really interested in hearing just kind of a few stories from y'all for 5 minutes or so, just so I can situate my remarks and just to kind of get the conversation going. So, does someone mind coming off mute and sharing a perspective or two? And I see names; I can call on people.
I could talk for a second. I'm in Madison, Indiana. We're a little bit of we've caused a little bit of our own problem. Main Street has been so successful that now property values are way up downtown, and ordinary people have trouble buying homes. They're being snatched up by out-of-towners who make big salaries and only come down on the weekends, which is a problem for us during the week, of course. Or they're being snatched up for bed and breakfast. We have a young person on our board who works for the city, and when she and her husband were looking to buy their first home, there was no place in downtown Madison they can afford. So she's living outside the city limits, even though she's on the Main Street board.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah. Rentals and home ownership is very difficult for young people here.
Okay. Can certainly relate to that in Seattle. And nice to hear Madison right off the bat. Congratulations on games. How about another perspective or two?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I can go ahead.
Please.
One of our issues is we are about a block and a half, 2 blocks from a university, Trident University. So we have student housing downtown. A big initiative was to get that upper floor housing, and we've done that. So we've kind of run out of space and looking at where to develop more housing opportunities, because it's not just the students that need housing, but it's seasonal for them. But we have other growing families that buying a house isn't really within their limits, but a townhouse or something like that, an apartment, would be way more doable for them. So we have a unique situation with our university so close to our downtown, but also growing families, and our aging population, honestly, not wanting to live in such big houses anymore and kind of downsizing. So there's a need for that middle housing, and we don't have it.
Which community are you from, Mackenzie?
Angola, Indiana.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Y'all are a Boomstracker user, I think.
Yeah.
Nice to have you. Nice to know that we have someone familiar here.
Yep.
Is there one more story from someone on the call?
Anne or Heather, you put some comments in the chat, but would you want to come off mute and share with us?
Check too.
Yes, I'm happy to. I'm Anne from Auburn Main Street, and I am a Booms tracker, but haven't got started yet as well, just so you know.
Okay.
But
right.
We have a real need for diverse housing options in our downtown. We have a few opportunities that are underway, haven't started coming back up out of the ground yet. So unfortunately, we lost a few spaces, but the intention is that they are going to make some new housing available, which is desperately needed. The rental units that we do have in our downtown are full, and most of those renters or landlords have wait lists. So yeah, the demand is high right now to be downtown or be a part of it. So housing's a big need.
Okay.
We outside of town, just in our town, but just outside of our district area, they're looking at building some new apartment complexes. Again, those aren't going to be available for a little bit, but those are some of the solutions. I think part of it was ARPA funding, and some of that got to be utilized for some of the new ideas that are outside of town. But we're hopeful to see some impact.
Okay. Thank you. I'm gonna get into some slides a little more, but I hope we can keep this really bi-directional. Would welcome interruption if a question comes up as we're going. I'll try my best to keep an eye on the chat, but I don't mind the microphone if y'all don't mind coming off mute. So nice to see so many of you here and some familiar faces. Nice to see you, Andrea, my friend. Let's keep going. So what we'll cover, kind of my main points here. Yeah, first of all, why housing's worth your attention. Doesn't sound like you need that much persuading based on those stories we just heard. But I'll get into that a little bit. What we know about the state of Main Street housing, and I've pulled some numbers on Indiana specific stuff, or I'll kind of show where Indiana lines up in the rest of the network as a whole. And then I'll spend a fair bit of time talking about resources and tools that we've developed just help you along this. So the State of Housing Report, mostly what I'll talk about in that second bullet, the Housing Guidebook, which we put out last year. We have a Main Street Housing Quiz, which I think is kind of a fun way to access resources or find out what resources are available. And then the Booms Tracker, which I hope folks are familiar with. I think we'll have time for a quick demo of Booms if we get there quickly enough. But that's the Building Opportunities on Main Street Tracker, or Booms, which is our inventory tool we just launched a couple months ago. So to get into it just a bit more, why focus on housing? I mean, I think we all have heard the news stories. It sounds like you all are seeing it out your office windows, if not out your windows of your homes, that we have this housing shortage, that it's not just a coastal problem anymore, that more housing's coming. I feel like you just shared that, Anne, from Auburn. A lot of supply coming, but we're also seeing that housing development is slowing. So, especially as the interest rates are high, I think the housing starts are creeping a little bit slower. A lot of text on some of these slides, but so clearly there is demand in your Main Street communities in Indiana, across the country. We do have vacant space. I'll get to that a little bit more, some stats on what we see as far as vacancy. So there is room to grow. Additional residents support small businesses, can just shopping as locally as you possibly could. If you live downtown, pretty easy to support those downtown businesses instead of supporting like the Walmarts on the edge of town kind of thing. I think more residents downtown. Jane Jacobs in the 60s wrote that book, Death and Life, Great American Cities, and made the point about eyes on the street. So the more people you have downtown, the more you get more activity, and the more people are around, the more you'll feel a sense of like safety and comfort being out, early in the morning, late at night, all the rest of it. It also obviously has a great impact, I think, adding downtown housing on our climate and on mitigating climate change. So less reliance on personal automobiles. You don't have to get in the car to go everywhere all the time. That also just means, things are accessible and we can be out as humans more and sort of lighten that collective impact. We can think about housing in terms of the 4 points. I'm not going to belabor this. This is, I think, in our housing guidebook, like a big spread on this. So if you think about the 4 points, kind of in the same way we just showed, like housing certainly fits in. I know I gather at conference, there's often sessions that are like, what this should be the 5th point. I think there was a session in Birmingham put on by Julie Fitzpatrick, I think in Pennsylvania, but her fifth point was going to be well-being and isolation and loneliness and what Main Street means for that. Certainly that matters. All these things, I think housing can fit in and support that that fight against loneliness as well, and well-being. But some other stats we've pulled, some other work we've done in our work to kind of show what housing could mean. We kind of borrowed from a methodology established by Donovan Rivkema in Place Economics and looked at this Bureau of Labor Statistics consumer expenditure survey data. So this is a survey that basically says, like, how much do Americans spend on housing? How much do they spend on food at home, food outside the home, household furnishings, personal care products? So we sort of open sourced that methodology more or less. And we looked at Mason City, Iowa, which is a relatively affordable place to live based on data, and Boston, Massachusetts. And you can see that for every occupied one-bedroom unit added, you get between $23,000 in annual economic impact for downtown businesses, and then up to 50,000 thereabouts in Boston. So a pretty big spread, but you think about adding, 10 units, 20 units to your downtown, you're talking about pretty quickly $500,000 in additional revenue for those downtown businesses that we're all trying to support. And then, just to kind of sum it up in the opposite angle, I think it's pretty clear. We could argue, some people argue about supply and demand and the ways that adding more housing doesn't necessarily drive down the cost of housing and the cost of rent. I think there's some truth to the fact that those are sort of separate in some ways. Airbnb is a problem in a lot of places, but they are intertwined. So we have this huge shortage of housing, 3.9 million unit shortage. That does contribute to affordability. That does contribute to homelessness. That does contribute to workforce challenges and people traveling long distances to go to service sector jobs. We ran that as a part of our survey, small business survey last spring, and saw that more than half of small business owners said that housing affordability is a concern, sort of a challenge for them as they try to hire and retain staff. Housing availability as well. Housing scarcity contributes to carbon, like we just said. It just kind of contributes to human misery. So the more housing we could have where it's needed, where there's high demand, and especially the more housing we can contribute in places like Main Streets, sort of like a great opportunity for us. The other thing is the vacant spaces. So I don't know maybe this is a good chance to pause here after I show these bullets, but I'm curious how vacancy looks in your communities. So we, in a survey, I think this was early 2023, maybe late 2022, about 7 out of 8 Main Street leaders said housing is a concern in their community. 3/4 said there's not enough housing to accommodate those who want to live there. More than 90% said, vacant upper floors in their district. 1 in 20 said they don't have any vacant buildings. So almost everyone's got an entirely vacant building in their district. And about a third said they have vacant lots without any use. So without, not used for surface parking, not used for anything, just a vacant lot. How do these numbers resonate with folks? If you don't mind coming off mute and sharing a perspective or two. Does this sound familiar? Do any of you not have any vacancy? Are you fully built out? What are you seeing as far as vacancy specifically?
I'm Heather with Greenfield Main Street, and I would say we don't have a lot of vacancies as far as usable buildings. My issue right now is vacancies in buildings that need to be renovated to make them usable to add housing.
Okay.
I'm in the process of trying to work with our problem is also most of our housing in our downtown is within a historic district. So that puts a whole nother ball of restrictions around what can be done with what we have. And I'm currently working with our county city council and our historic board to try to put in new ordinances so that we can start taking action against the owners of the properties that are letting their buildings sit vacant and unusable.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, familiar story. And interesting that historic preservation is like a, maybe not a constraint, but a challenge in some ways. Yeah, comes up. Anyone else?
I'm with the Association for a Better Rockport, and we're kind of in the same boat as Heather.
Okay.
We're fairly new to the Odin side of things and everything, so we're trying to put in these ordinances, and we just worked with an engineering firm out of Indianapolis to kind of assess our town, and see what all we needed to do. So we actually just got that report back late last week, I believe. And so we're kind of coordinating with them on, they didn't tell us anything that we didn't already know or that we weren't already discussing. It was just, putting it on paper so that we can figure out a plan of action. We do have a lot of vacant buildings in our downtown. Our downtown is a little bit unique anyway, because our main street, you don't have to drive through it to get through the town. So if you come to our main street, you're coming to it for a purpose. So it's not just a pass through Main Street in our town. So it's kind of unique as well. But we do have a new apartment complex that's been there for a few years. That is, it's booked up all the time. It's beautiful, but then all of our other buildings are historical buildings, and they're probably going to be condemned. So we have a lot of issues. And I have a business on Main Street that is in a historical building too. So, it's just, we're kind of a unique Main Street area, I think, even though we are trying to take those necessary steps, but we're definitely in the same position as Heather. So
I see Heather's got a question for you in the chat, if you don't mind. The company you used. Yeah. Okay, thanks, folks. I'll keep going here. But yeah, I love having folks jump in. So our two big resources we've kind of come up with as far as reports are these cover pages on the left and right. So on the left, we have this At Home on Main Street report we put out in May of 2022. This was basically, in really broad strokes, a first look at the data. So I know many of you probably have heard from me or from the research team as far as like draw your boundaries for your district. One of the reasons it's great to have the actual what streets on the map or include your Main Street districts is because we can take that data and combine it with census data and say, yeah, what do we see as far as housing? So across the network, we see that the majority of housing is single unit detached. So, it's kind of single family homes. That surprised me. One qualification to that, so we use census tract data for some of this, and census tracts are larger areas, kind of like neighborhood areas, and sometimes main streets land at the intersection of multiple tracts. So we might be talking about a fairly large area. Nevertheless, these are the areas that include the Main Street districts, and to see that it's a majority single family homes is striking. About half of the housing is 50 years old or older, so historic by one definition, by that 50-year threshold. Maybe aging, because buildings that are 50 years old are 1970s, early 70s. I don't think buildings from the 70s aren't the most beloved, I think, by preservationists or probably many people. We saw in aggregate a 10% net increase in housing units across the entire network between 2010 and 2020, which sounds great. 10% is good, but relative to the demand we're seeing, probably not enough. We also highlighted some barriers to improving housing situations. So I look a little bit closer at the data. We have these, I love these charts, but they are charts that you gotta say, if you look up the report, you can find these and spend more time with it. But what this one shows is it's showing on each row is a coordinating program's geography. So all the main streets within the coordinating program. And this particular one is showing the age of housing units, with the light blue showing pre-1940 housing. All the way off to the right in this kind of tan color is housing built since 2010. And Indiana, y'all fall down about, 4/5 of the way down. So you have a good bit of pretty old housing. So about 31% of housing in Indiana main streets, as far as when this analysis was conducted, was built before 1940. But a pretty good spread across the other decades as well. Similar kind of charts for the types of housing. So the American Community Survey from the census has this data on how many single unit detached, versus row houses versus small apartment buildings versus huge apartment buildings versus mobile homes is the very last one. You have this interesting legend at the bottom here. And here Indiana appears closer to the top. And here the chart is showing the proportion that is single family. They're ordered that way. So the blue in this one is the single unit detached housing. So Indiana's closer to the middle. You got about, what is that? Probably 65%, I think, of your housing was built or is in single unit detached form. And actually, we highlighted in that state of housing report that Madison is prototypical. It's like lands exactly where the entire network lands. So I think 66.2% was the number of single unit detached housing that you see in Madison. And that is exactly the number that we see across the entire network. Coatesville, Indiana, I'm not too familiar with, but statistically, we called that one out as especially high. So about 94% of housing in Coatesville, which I think is, I don't know if Coatesville is represented here, but I think it's a town of about 500 people. 94% of that housing is single unit detached. So anyway, these are not necessarily, just sprinkling in some notes we've seen about Indiana and about character of housing. We looked at affordability as well. So this chart showing Indiana nearer the top, in the top kind of quarter probably. This is ordered by the percent of housing that is $1,000 or more to rent per month. And so Indiana has relatively affordable condition, kind of a lower proportion than a lot of states when it comes to that housing that's less than $500 a month. Quite a lot that's between 500 and 1,000. I'll say I don't think the census is a great source of data on the cost of housing, on rental rates, how much it costs to rent a housing unit. So this is, not the best data you'll ever see, not probably the best analysis. It also elides like the fact that the cost of living and the proportion of, I guess, your incomes in big cities tend to be a little bit higher. So it doesn't sort of account for the cost of living in different places. So I'm not trying to say Indiana, you got it easy. It sounds like plenty of challenges with affordability there too. And then just a couple last points here. So we looked at mapping out programs based on the proportion of housing change they had over the 2010 to 2020 decennial censuses. And you can see in Indiana, y'all did pretty well. So the green triangles, they look more like tents, are especially the larger green triangles are places where there was a large increase in housing proportionate to what you had there before. The downward pointing yellow triangles indicate where there was a loss of housing. So kind of few places it looks like in Indiana that had that loss. And the blue dots are where there was a small amount of change. So looking at the programs y'all had in Indiana, just quickly, we could see that like Newcastle exploded. I mean, it went from 11 housing units in the 2010 count to 41. So I guess still pretty small, but that represents a 273% increase. So congratulations to folks there. But other programs, Kokomo, Jasper, Bloomington, I don't know if it's Lebanon or Lebanon, Newburgh, North Manchester, all had more than 25% increase in housing. Is anything, as you look at that chart, surprise folks? Does it seem about right? I think sometimes this data can also be kind of tricky in that it's a particular point in time. Could be there's construction happening. I'm sort of surprised to see some of these places like Merriam had a 26% decrease. I'm guessing that was probably housing in development, but if folks want to come off mute for a second and share anything about what they see here, I'd be keen to hear. Or we can keep going.
This is Missy Krulik with the Heart of Lebanon in Lebanon, Indiana. Okay. And I think we're seeing a lot of growth in our community right now. So that's why the uptick in our change in housing. Yep. We're having a lot of new developments come into our main street and downtown, providing more multi-use storefronts on the lower level and apartments in the upper level. So that's why
great.
the change here is our explosion of growth that we're having right now.
Thank you, Missy. Has there been, how has that gone? Is there community kind of appreciation for that growth? Is there tension? Is there a little bit of both? How are y'all feeling it?
We have a lot of tension. The change is really hard for our community.
Yeah.
But you have the newcomers, the transplants, we call them, that are excited about the growth and the additional buildings coming to the downtown and development. So,
does that experience, that kind of tension with growth, resonate with anyone else? Brett, see you come off mute. Nope, you came off mute, but we still can't hear you. No, not yet.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Brett with Noblesville Main Street. And look at those numbers are very interesting. I think we probably are exceeding Newcastle Main Street at 273%. We've added
Oh,
our
wow.
mayor is, yeah, and that's just in the last 2 years, 23 and 24.
Okay.
And we are experiencing very much the same thing Lebanon is. I grew up here in Noblesville when it was 5,000 people, and we're at 70,000 now. And
Wow.
we have a lot of problems with change. We've added 2 parking garages in the downtown area. One of them is an apartment. We've got 2 other large apartment complexes under construction or being leased now. A lot of changes to the downtown. We have a waiting list to get into the downtown businesses or buildings as far as offices or restaurants. And it's quite a bit to manage at this point.
Okay.
So it's interesting. Thank you.
No, thank you. Yeah. And I'm glad to hear, someone react to the data and say like, well, they may have been right at that point in time, but things have really changed since then. Yeah.
I would suggest slower pace, but a lot of these things needed to happen. And so our mayor was very aggressive and finished them, and we're very happy with it.
Okay.
The change is tough though.
Yeah, I get that.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you. So that is the state of housing report, and we'll have more time to talk, I hope, at the end as things go on here. But so the guidebook, I hope folks have seen the housing guidebook we put out last March. So this was really our realization that a case study here or there wouldn't really be enough. We wanted to basically come up with something that was more like a 101 level guide. It's not a textbook. It's only, 60 pages or something like that. And it's pretty glossy. So I think it's pretty accessible. I hope folks are making use of it, or if you haven't already, we'll look it up. But we talk about, how you can get started, some first steps you can take, like taking stock of your housing assets. That's our kind of inventory suggestion. How you can promote housing potential if you feel like you need more housing. How to sort of like identify a building that has high potential and kind of market that. And then we have some like 101 level stuff about codes and regulations, sort of building codes and zoning code challenges, means of egress and fire suppression come up a lot. And then financing sources and terms to know, basically how to read a pro forma, what it means to have a project pencil. But all this was written with this kind of spirit of this quote from Sherry Early of the Incremental Development Alliance. I think Sherry's an Indiana person herself. She said, you don't need to be an expert in all the types of buildings and developers. Just know the general trends. Just get the gist. And I think that's what the housing guidebook really aimed to do. We did highlight some case studies, some project case studies from across the network, across the country, and some district narratives from, Michigan, Iowa, California, Louisiana. I especially love the project case study from Marion, Iowa, because it built on a surface parking lot, an old strip mall and surface parking lot, and adding new housing with small commercial spaces below. It seems like a really thoughtful, interesting project and a way to sort of make use of space that is, was being used for storage for cars, for parking, but can be so much more, I think. So just some of those steps that we came up with from the guidebook, how to incorporate. The important step is just making housing a priority and building it into the vision for your district or your downtown. So as you do sort of community surveys or as you engage with folks, finding out what kind of housing they'd like to see, and how much housing we feel like is needed. So engaging a lot of different stakeholders, city officials, code officials, obviously residents, young and old, newcomers, longtime residents, business owners, to kind of understand what the market is. We'll talk a lot more about the housing inventory because I think we're gonna have time to go through the booms tracker here in a minute. But yeah, so important to know how much vacant space you have, who owns the properties and how to get a hold of them. Notes on particular characteristics or conditions of properties, current housing data. I think it's really, I think I have a slide coming up about a market analysis for housing. Having local contact, local points of connection for absentee owners. I know absentee or neglectful owners are a bear and something that's like really hard to overcome. I think we still have Main Street America can still do some good work and sort of highlighting or daylighting successful policies from across the network. So we still have work ahead to help on that kind of a thing, to help with breaking the log jam or breaking inertia and getting some of those like troubling vacant buildings occupied and activated. So fostering relationships, I really like in the guidebook we talk about just try to make a biweekly, once a month coffee with someone in the planning department or a code official, to talk through specific properties that what's possible with what assets you have. I think Casey Woods, the executive director of Emporia Main Street in Kansas, they're doing fantastic housing work in Emporia, but he was really a proponent of like getting to know realtors and actually and those property owners, so when a property is going to come available, and basically you have a pipeline in your Rolodex kind of a thing of like how to connect different parties to make sure that something doesn't sit vacant for long, or that you get the right kinds of property owners who are going to be really engaged and really good stewards of the downtown. As far as the real estate market, we heard from, I think, Bethany Rogers, who at the time was at Newtown Macon and Macon, Georgia. Now is my colleague at Main Street America as our director of strategic projects. But she led this CDFI, this Community Development Financial Institution within Newtown Macon. And she said basically to do a market analysis, to hire someone, it costs some money to get someone to come in and do a market analysis, but it makes such a big difference to sort of convince or to compel action when it comes to adding housing supply or what kind of housing people want. Like, what do you have and what could you do? And you can do a lot of that. I mean, that's what the previous image shows. You can do a lot just with Zillow or existing sort of internet-based databases, like look and see what's out there and take note of that. Or you can hire a firm, she said it's sort of an excellent return on investment to just hire a firm. And I think there are many, many firms across the country. I'm sure there are many, many in Indiana who could do a downtown housing market study for you. And you could have that asset in your back pocket whenever questions come up. And then I think my last sort of first step, and then I'll get into the last couple of resources, including booms, but it's just like to have a homegrown small scale developer, I think, is such an incredible asset. Sort of like having a unicorn in your downtown. If you have someone who owns properties or someone who's like interested in this kind of thing and working with buildings, maybe it could be a contractor, a general contractor in the area. You can really that can be so transformative for getting folks invested in a different way. You could have owner occupied projects and what that can mean for wealth building and preventing sort of radical change to your downtown's character, preventing displacement and gentrification. I don't know how folks feel about those terms coming up in your communities, but certainly something we hear from folks across the country. So I think stewarding and sort of like encouraging folks who aren't maybe real estate developers right now. I once heard at a developer forum with the Urban Land Institute, ULI. Someone joked that, who is a developer, joked that the only thing you need as a credential to be a developer is a business card that says you're a developer. And I think you probably need some capital. You need to know something about financing, but it's not like you're going to go to college to get a degree in real estate development. It's actually just something that takes some grit and some know-how. And I think you got Sherry Early in the Incremental Development Alliance right there. I'm trying to remember which community she's in Indiana, but you got great assets to start this kind of culture if you don't have it already. Getting toward the end here, and I think I'm kind of right on schedule for us to have some good time to talk at the end. But we did roll out this housing quiz, the Main Street housing quiz. My colleague Emmy Morita and the research team kind of led this project. We used earlier stage, it's kind of crazy to say, but AI to generate some images and kind of have some fun with it. So, this is kind of like cool use of Dolly to build out the imagery for the platform. But basically, we call this like a BuzzFeed quiz. If you're familiar with a BuzzFeed quiz, like what kind of witch are you, or what kind of a sandwich are you, or whatever, like goofy quizzes are out there, like personality tests. But we tried to do it for Main Street housing. So you answer, I think it's 12 or 14 questions about the sort of housing conditions in your downtown. And you receive, like, based on your responses, you are a Main Street superstar who's navigating housing hurdles. And, more important than this kind of cute language, we point you to resources that kind of directly address the challenges that you describe in the data that you input as part of this like quiz survey thing. So if you haven't seen that, take a look. I think it's pretty clever and kind of fun. So, and then Booms. The Booms tracker is our newest tool. I think it could have some pretty transformative impact. So clearly this came up from the same housing initiative, this At Home on Main Street project. We built this thing to be map centric. So this is not just looking at a spreadsheet. I know folks maybe are familiar with Maestro and kind of a CRM database interface. This is not something where you're going to look at a list of addresses and just start filling out fields. This is actually to see a map of your district, punch your thumb or tap your mouse on the particular property. You get presented a list of questions and you answer the 10 or 12 questions or whatever it is per the specific property and go on to the next one. And I'll demo this in just a second because I think we will have time. So this is available to all designated Main Street programs with Main Street America in 2023. Currently, we are going to add, obviously, the 2024, those new programs in Indiana and across the network as soon as we possibly can. I expect that'll be this summer, hopefully next month. And I've also gotten the kind of go ahead. So Andrea or anyone else who knows of communities that are sort of interested in starting a Main Street program, we can basically bring anyone who wants to use Booms in. So it can gather sort of a lot more data about what's going on in your buildings in your districts. We piloted an early version of Booms last summer with 8 local programs across the country, some big cities, some really small towns. And had great kind of results from that. I always highlight Wausau, Wisconsin was one of our programs. I think they had 240 properties thereabout. They had 2 people work on this thing for 2 days, and they surveyed their entire district of 240 properties. That's the kind of like speed and efficiency we tried to build into Booms. And obviously, the building opportunities on Main Street, the name will signal that we see vacant space as a tremendous opportunity for all those reasons I highlighted at the beginning. The chance to have more customers for downtown businesses, the chance just to add housing, the chance for the building to have more revenue for the property owner. So they're not just hamstrung by limited rent. They can actually maintain the building a lot better if they have more revenue coming in for it. So kind of a preservation piece or tactic there too. Anyway, so this is kind of what Booms looks like as far as the interface for entering data. Again, I think we can get into this in a second. It's a live demo. But One important note also, so whereas in the past, I think keeping an inventory of your properties on paper or in a binder or in a Excel sheet, with this, you have it in your pocket all the time. It's built on a website basically. And so anytime you want to refer back to who owns that building, or is like you see a space in your district that's suddenly vacant or going to become vacant, you can pull out your phone, pull up Booms, and add that data, update that data, or pull down that data. We also have a dashboard view for every district and then every program in the network. So you can showcase what's going on with the opportunities for housing, showcase what's going on with the buildings in your district, to city officials, to your boards, to building owners or developers or entrepreneurs who want to start a business, whatever. And I'll show that in just a second too. So I always get a little nervous doing a live demo because it's a dangerous thing. Things can go wrong. But I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second and pull up the Booms tracker. While I do that, any questions from folks? Anything surprising, folks? Clear out some of these.
Mike, just a.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, Heather.
I was just going to ask, so is this a comparable program of locable / districts, whatever it is now?
Locable. I don't know that one. That's new to me. I thought I heard it all. Let's tell me, what is locable?
So it's kind of I believe it's kind of the same. I don't think it's as much just specific to properties as businesses in general. And if anybody else uses locable or districts that can share on that, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, is anyone else familiar? I have to Google that. Let me write it down.
I mean, I use both, but I think Booms Tracker is going to be really different because it's going to allow us to track the vacancies and give it in a lot more user-friendly format. I don't know how to get the data from either one of those to show like it will with Booms Tracker. The one I think I was curious about that it would coordinate with is Maestro more than anything, so that we could download and upload that information fairly seamlessly without having a lot of duplication, and that information would be able to kind of be housed in both ways, because even in Maestro, it doesn't pull out in a really user-friendly way. So Booms Tracker is going to allow that. That's my 2 cents on it, but.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a nice endorsement, Ann. So yeah, we'll talk about Maestro a little bit. And I've talked to Travis and Relish Jar folks about ways we can get the two integrated. I think that's still in the pipeline. Still something we want to do. Wasn't as easy as I hoped it would be to get it in the initial cut. But so I'm going to show real quick what this is. Booms Tracker. It's like I say, effectively a website. So I'll show a little bit of everything here, but there's an about page that just gives you some background. There's a getting started page that has like pretty extensive instructions on how to use it if you're having trouble. But on the main Booms Tracker page, you'll see a program locator, and we'll use this in a second to do a demo. So it lists every program that we have built into the thing. It shows coordinating programs. You can click on Indiana, and you'll see that in Indiana, you have 16,475 properties across all 31 districts that we have in the platform. You're at 0% complete. So I think despite your efforts in some communities and trying to remember Angola, you're still getting to 1%. You got to get 1,600 properties, I guess, or no, 164 properties to get to 1%. Anyway, we have a national dashboard I can show. Indiana, you folks have access to a statewide dashboard. We have some stats like what we've seen so far to date. I think we're over 1,600 properties, so this maybe needs to be updated later today. But you can see how we're doing with vacancy, and we have this leaderboard. That's how I recognized that Angola, you all showing up at 20% of your district entered already into Booms Tracker. That's 35 parcels. So you can see how you're faring against some of your quote unquote competitors across the network. We do have at the bottom a feedback link. So I just want to highlight, if you start to use Boomstracker and you're having difficulty, or you're really loving it, please click there and give us some feedback. We'd love to continue to build this thing out. So real quick, is there someone on the phone, on the line here, who has not used Boomstracker yet, but knows really well a specific property in your district? Can someone come off mute and be the guinea pig with us?
Sure, I'll be happy to.
Okay. Where are you coming from?
Rockport, Indiana. So do you want the actual physical address or?
Oh no, first let's well, actually, do we not have, let's see, Rockport? Do we not,
We may
are
not
you
be
a
on
new?
here because this is
Oh
the
no.
first time that I've seen it. So I
Okay,
don't know.
So, Mike, just to let you
We've been a
know,
part of Main Street District before, but that was years ago. And
Okay,
then
okay.
we just
Came
rejoined back in 23. So
Oh,
that
I'm
might be
so
part of
sorry
it.
that, yeah, I'm so
So-
sorry. I was excited to look at it with you. Yeah, go ahead.
Mike, we have levels, and so our entry level ODMs, they do not pay their Main Street America membership. So
Okay.
we should preface this with a NOMS or an IMS that pays a Main Street America membership.
Okay. Okay. Well, so thank you, Abby. I will say, so our aspiration is to add in a Rockport, even if you're not paying a Main Street America membership. If we get your boundaries drawn, and we can add you to this thing, and I think that's just to the good. So if you're interested, I have a slide here. I have one more slide, I think, after this demo. You can send us an email. We'll get you in the queue, even in Rockport. But yeah, is there
Thank you.
someone? Oh, of
We can
course,
do
yeah. Thank
Greenfield,
you.
Indiana.
Greenfield?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know which one of these two you are? It always comes up that there's more than one
We're Main
Greenfield.
Street.
Main Street. Great. Okay. So you are. So in Greenfield, Indiana, y'all have 442 parcels in your district. So I'm going to click login to page. With my master login, I can kind of play with everything here. But you'll have to have a specific credential, a username and password, and I can show you how to get that or how to request that. So here's your district. It looks like you're showing a lot of zeros because you haven't used it yet, and that's totally fine. Got to start somewhere. Got 442 parcels. Let's enter one. So what address, what intersection can I zoom in on to find a property that you know really well? In Greenfield.
If you do like right downtown, State Road 9 and US 40.
Road 9 and US 40. State Road 9. Okay, so is that State Street and US 40 probably on this map?
Yes.
Okay. Which one of these properties should we go for?
If it shows you street address, I believe it's probably 21 West Main Street.
21 West Main Street. Probably this one. There we go. 21 West Main Street. So I'll show one way to orient yourself that's nice. So this is an office or bank building according to our master database that, says different things for different places. But you can click on base map gallery and show the satellite view to kind of check that you're looking at the building you think you're looking at. We also have a kind of a cleaner color map called from OpenStreetMap. So you can check to make sure you're entering data for the property you think you are. If you got the right one here, I'm going to hit this tab. This is like this orange tab is subtle. Like I wish it was more obvious, but that brings up the questions. So Heather, is this a valid address or property?
It is.
It is. Okay. And there is a building there?
There is.
How many floors above ground does that building have?
I want to say 3.
Okay. It's a 3-story building. Is it entirely vacant, partially vacant, fully occupied? Not sure.
Entirely vacant.
Entirely vacant. Okay. I just want to flag, if we said partially vacant, it would ask us, is the ground floor occupied or the upper floor is occupied? So we kind of do differentiate that. So entirely vacant. What is the building used for? Like, what is its original use? Do you know?
I don't know exactly. It's been vacant for quite a while.
Okay. That's a good, interesting question. So we could say it's either commercial, like it's always been offices upstairs and the business downstairs, or you could say mixed use. So probably the two categories that would fit
I would
most
say mixed
easily.
use would be, my guess would be office space on the lower level and apartments
Great.
above.
Great. Okay. So because we said mixed use, it asks how many businesses appear to be operating. I think that's probably 0 based on being vacant. How many housing units appear to be located in it? I'm guessing that's probably 0 since you said it's vacant. Does the building appear to be in need of maintenance or repair?
Yes.
Okay. I guess that would probably be your answer. Is the building significant in some way? Is it culturally significant, historically significant, significant in terms of its use? It's historic. Okay. Is there anything you could say about how it's historic? If not, that's fine too.
Just the architecture of the building itself is within our historic district.
Okay. Architecture's historic within historic district. So you could write whatever you want in this these fields. This is not meant to be, it's not going to be checked by the National Park Service. It's just for your specific notes, so you can refer back to it later. Are there any environmental risks to the building or parcel, like flooding, earthquakes, anything like that?
No.
Okay, no. Do you have any knowledge about who owns it?
Yes.
Okay. Would you say is it publicly owned? Is it owned by someone who knows Main Street? Is it owned by a nonprofit? Is it owned by an absentee or neglectful owner?
That one.
That was the one where you could see like my chin turn a little bit with the. So, is there anything you could say about that owner? If you know who they are and you know they're neglectful, and this could be anything. We could leave this at nothing. You don't have to say mean words about him here, but you can just
He owns
enter
multiple
notes.
properties.
Owns multiple properties. Are they all vacant?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I'll
Owns
take that
multiple
back. I'm
vacant.
sorry. At least 2 of the 3 are vacant.
Okay. At least 2 of the 3 are vacant. 3 properties are vacant. Okay. So in this field, you could always write, the contact information, the best way to get a hold of the person. Do they like text messages versus a phone call? Do they like to eat coffee, get coffee downtown? Do they go to Greenfield Chocolates on Thursdays? Whatever. You could write anything you want there. Sort of meant to be just like notes for later, or for if you get another staff member and you want them to become familiar with the district, they can log in and see this information too. Any other comments to note about the property? Red flags, green flags, issues with condition?
Yeah, it needs repair.
Needs repair. Okay. Okay. So that's it. You can add a photo if you had a photo. You can upload a photo from a computer, or you can take a picture from your phone. You hit submit, and thank goodness it worked. I will refresh this screen, and we will see that you now have that property entered. It's shown in the hatching there. And so you're off and running with the first done. I've entered a bunch of data that we gathered through the pilot, and I find it sort of addictive. Like, even if I'm not the one standing there in front of the buildings, like just entering data that I have in another file, just to go through, you just kind of like, I feel like I want to keep scratching that itch. Maybe that's just me being a weirdo, but I find it pretty satisfying. So I'll refresh the Greenfield dashboard view, and we'll see this populate. So now we're showing you got one building in need of maintenance or repair. You can see that it's significant. You can see that it's got vacancy. It's weird. This should be showing. So yeah, something's wrong with our formula in this case. This should be showing. We said 3 floors, so it should be showing 3 housing units. We have a rough calculation, a conservative calculation of how much housing can fit in a building based on whether it's partially vacant or fully vacant and how tall it is. So that one I'm going to have to check on. These would show the number of current housing units you've identified, the number of current businesses you identified. One cool thing, and maybe I'll show another dashboard. I'll show Fort Pierce here. I usually have, this is the one I was just finishing entering with the pilot data for, just to show some additional function as you have more and more properties entered. These pie charts for vacancy, use, and parcel land use are interactive. So you could say, I'm interested in looking at commercial buildings that are partially vacant. And you can see the map update with just those properties. You can say, let me show one other quick dashboard, and then I swear I'm going to stop and we're going to have time for questions still. But top Campus Village. So in Davenport, Iowa, this guy Brian Kramer, who could be my best friend someday, has gone through and entered the entire district in Davenport, Iowa. And you can see, I like this as an example, parking lots. Here's all the parking lots in Davenport, Iowa, as a quick click. Or here are all the residential properties. Just that kind of access to that kind of data, or that kind of access to vacancy information. Here are all the fully occupied. Here are all those that are unclear. Here are all those fully vacant buildings. I think that can be kind of powerful. So that's the demo. I'll flip back again to the PowerPoint, which I think I'll have to share differently. Give me 1 second. Stop sharing. Share. We're almost at the end here. I'm just going to share my whole screen now. That's how I meant to do. There we go. So I will share this slide with you, Abby, if you don't mind making it available. But this is a link to the Booms Tracker. If you have a program that's on the roster here, so it's with dues paid by those two entities that Abby mentioned, you should have login credentials available. So just send an email to research@mainstreet.org, and we'll respond within a day or two, a business day or two, with your username and password. You can check your boundaries if we have them on file. You can visit this link, and then the last link is to update your boundaries. If you see your boundaries are incorrect or wrong or are out of date, you can update them with that tool. If you are a program like Rockport and you're not currently in the tool, I'm going to tell you the first thing we're going to need is your boundaries. So if you can go in and draw boundaries using that last link, that gets us all set up to build it out for you. I think that's the end of my slides, and I think we have just a couple of minutes, hopefully enough time to answer questions if you have. So I'm going to stop sharing and see y'all. Any reactions, questions, concerns, demands? It's okay if not. Okay. Well, I hope this wasn't too interactive for y'all. I know sometimes I join a webinar and I think I'm just going to sit back and watch. But I appreciate y'all being here, and hopefully these tools are useful.
Thanks, Mike, and we really appreciate it. And yeah, I encourage you guys to start kind of digging into that Booms Tracker. I'm also like a data nerd, so now I'm like, I want to do this. But we really appreciate it. This presentation will get uploaded to YouTube, so if you've got other people you want to see it, it should be there hopefully today, if not next week when Abby's back. But thank you all again, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks.